Welcome, my name is Lorenz. This is System Self. Let's talk about micro forgiveness. It's easy to think of forgiveness as this thing that we do when something really big and bad happens to us. But what about all the little things that happen to us throughout the day that trigger us or upset us or somehow hurt us? These things happen all the time between people, and it's easy to forget just how important it is to bring awareness to those things, to bring compassion to ourselves in those situations, and to bring a type of micro forgiveness to that whole quality of being human. There's an Eastern European mystic named Gurdjieff that lived in the early 19th century. And one of the most confronting aspects of his teachings was his idea that human beings are like machines. And his definition of a machine is something that acts entirely in response to external inputs. So if you think about something like a kitchen blender or a microwave, a blender cannot have responsibility because it entirely functions based on a person using it, based on an external input. And similarly, Gurdjieff likens humans to machines, that we are entirely responding to causes outside of ourselves, that we're basically perpetually affecting in the web of cause and effect that is the world. And this is a really interesting idea to consider in the context of micro forgiveness, because we are constantly being bombarded by things that happen outside of ourselves, that cause us to respond in particular ways, that cause us to get triggered or angry or hurt, and more often than not, we act out those responses. And it can be that powerful to think about the idea that the only way to truly transcend this kind of cause and effect is through forgiveness, is through overcoming the cause that has happened. So something outside of you has happened and somehow you're triggered, somehow you're upset or hurt, and you want to respond and react to that. Well, by definition, that is a chain of cause and effect. And by becoming aware of that, and primarily by actually releasing that, by forgiving that, you can reclaim the energy that is caught up in that equation. You know, if you think about it, right? Something happens, and whether you respond or not, maybe you're unable to respond, or maybe you're just carrying that with you. Well, internally, you're stuck in a response, whether that response is expressed or not. You're stuck in a response to that cause, which is consuming part of your energy. And so when you bring a concept of forgiveness to that, it's about actually releasing yourself. It's about forgiving. It's in the word itself, right? It's forgiving, so that you're able to reclaim that part of your energy, whatever is caught up in that situation, and give it somewhere else. And it's very powerful to think about the concept of taking responsibility in this sense, because I had a really hard time understanding what it means to fully take responsibility, particularly in the context of forgiveness. If you think about the machine metaphor, right? Like this idea that a kitchen blender cannot have responsibility. Anything that is entirely responsive to external stimulus cannot actually have responsibility for itself. In order to have responsibility for itself, it must have its own agency. It must be capable of being a cause in its own right. And this is really powerful to think about in the context of forgiveness, because we exist in this chain of cause and effect, and we're always being affected by causes. So causes are coming in and we're responding to them. And in a situation where that is true 100% of the time, where we are completely unaware of the extent to which we are being affected by external causes, we basically don't have responsibility. And in order to take responsibility, in order to step into responsibility, we have to become aware of just how much we're being affected by external inputs. And in that awareness, we begin to have a capability, a capacity to choose differently. And therein lies the responsibility. Once we're able to choose differently, once we're able to forgive these external stimulus, these external inputs, we're able to take responsibility and be a cause in the world in our own right. So let's unpack this a little bit and talk about forgiveness in practice. The first thing I want to emphasize is that we're talking about forgiveness in the micro sense. There's obviously forgiveness in the macro sense, the really bad traumatic things that happen that need to be processed and forgiven, and that's not what we're talking about. We're talking about everyday grievances, the little things that people do to hurt us, the ways that we respond that might be hurting other people and we're not even aware of, the everyday ways that we're reactive to what's going on around us. So the small grievances that just affect our lives all the time, and how to be more aware of those and process them and let them go. What I found works very well when I feel triggered by something small is to really explore where I might be doing the same thing in my life. Inevitably, I find that if I feel really triggered by something that someone is doing, most likely I can find myself doing the same thing. Maybe it's a slightly different situation, slightly different context, and it looks a little bit different, but if I look deeply, if I engage in that self-exploration, I can see the same behavior in myself. This might be as simple as, you're driving your car and when people cut you off, you get really angry and pissed off. And if you look deeply, if you really sit with yourself and observe, maybe you find that, wow, you do the same thing all the time. You cut people off all the time and don't think twice about it. And so it can be really powerful to recognize where those things that you hold grudges about, you actually do the same thing to other people. It's a cause for recognizing your own humanity, recognizing just how fallible you are, and in that recognition, coming into compassion. Because when you can recognize that about yourself and also recognize just how difficult it is to actually change yourself, just how difficult it is to be self-aware at that level, you can have a lot more compassion and tolerance and forgiveness for other people. Which brings me to my second point. This is really about forgiving ourselves. And if you're like most human beings, maybe you struggle with a little bit of self-criticism or a little bit of judgment, self-judgment. We're so hard on ourselves. As human beings, we're so hard on ourselves. And inevitably, we always have some sort of expectation or some sort of sense of not enough or inadequacy around certain things that we do, or we get angry because we want to look a particular way or eat a particular way or be good at something, and inevitably we let ourselves down. And it can be so powerful to become aware of these cycles. Maybe it's diet related and you find yourself eating foods that you don't want all the time, and you eat something you don't want and then you get angry at yourself and you tell yourself you're not going to do that anymore, and then you do it again. Or maybe it's a pattern of dysfunctional relationships, or procrastinating on something over and over. There are little things that almost every human being struggles with. And if you can bring awareness to that, and recognize that there's nothing wrong with you, that it's just part of the human condition, part of human nature, and bring forgiveness to that. That in itself is extremely transformative, because all of a sudden we realize how fallible we are as human beings. We realize just how difficult it is when we're being very honest and authentic with ourselves to be a human being. And if we can sincerely recognize in ourselves, it opens a universe of tolerance and forgiveness towards other people. The final practice I'll share is one that my yoga teacher Hari Kar shared with me, and it's a simple prayer. It's called the Ho'oponopono prayer. It's a Hawaiian prayer, and it goes, "I love you, I'm sorry, please forgive me, thank you." It's a very simple prayer, but it's so subtle and so powerful. And maybe the simplest way to understand it is that, many times when it comes to forgiveness and it comes to the ways that we are stuck with certain energy in our lives, certain resentments in our lives, the most powerful thing we can do is find a way to just resolve them, find a way to just take responsibility of a situation, whether it's fair or not, and transform it within ourselves, transform our relationship to it within ourselves. And this prayer is a way to do that. This prayer is a way to look at any situation and on a subtle level, take responsibility for it in your heart. I love you, whatever the situation is, whoever the person is, find that in your heart. I'm sorry. Truly try to find an understanding from their side and apologize for the whole situation, even if you feel absolutely wronged. Please forgive me. And thank you. Feel the gratitude for the release of that situation. I would say this is an advanced level practice. It can be very simple, but you can work with this practice in very advanced ways to release blockages, to release tensions and resentments in your life. And when you find a way to release any resentment in your life, you fundamentally liberate that energy. If we go back to the machine metaphor, you find a way to stop being an effect to a cause that has come into your life, whatever that may be. When you can release that resentment, you enable yourself to be your own agency, to rediscover your ability to choose again and to bring yourself, your full energetic potential back into your life on your terms. And that's fundamentally what forgiveness is about. It's about reclaiming energy that might be caught up in different situations with different people. Listen, it's bad enough that those things happened, right? It's bad enough that all those things happen. And so there's so many ways to look at that, from it's bad enough that it's happened to, you know what, I'm human, so is that person, we're all human, and there's so much room for compassion and tolerance and understanding and love. And I'm just going to let it go so that I can come into the world and bring my full agency, my full potential into creating a better world, into bringing more love and harmony and positivity into the world. So with that, I'm going to wrap up. If you enjoyed the video, please like it, please subscribe to the channel. This is System Self, where we explore awareness of the self and the systems we operate in. I very much look forward to our future conversations. Much love.